This is a video on why and how I went to college. I had an unhappy family life. I realized my parents were uneducated. I realized the people, 3 million people living around me, were idiots. And I realized that there were really, really deeply ugly, vile parts of Western nature. The character of Western people was deeply slave-owning and deeply aristocratic and deeply arrogant and snobby. And all of this ugliness of the soul developed over centuries by the aristocracy of Europe. You can see in the British royal family now, just vile souls in gigantic, rich rooms. And the constant tendency toward making other people slaves. This Anglo-culture propensity for the boss to be a tyrant. The boss tyrants you see on Father Knows Best and old American TV programs. Captain Kirk in Star Trek, commanding everyone around him to do the obvious that they're already doing, but he still has to open his big mouth and command them to do it. This vile, tyrannical nature of maleness and bosses and fathering in Western countries and cultures. And the deep love and tendency, unconscious, to turn anyone subordinate to you in status into a slave. This is a deep part of Western culture. It's a part of how one set of mind modules, the forebrain, was made to relate to the rest of the brain by Greek philosophers, starting with sick people, mentally ill people like Plato, and perpetuated by mental illness in Christian fathers. And so the forebrain became a dictator to the rest of the brain. The nice thing about the body and key energy in Asian philosophy and culture, which made Taoism and Buddhism so appealing to me at MIT, is it perfectly corrected this Descartesian tyranny of the mind. It was the counterbalance, the perfect counterbalance. It was no accident. And I just tore out a newspaper editorial today by a rather incompetent Japanese middle-ranked professor that quite correctly talks about Yawarakasa and Yasashisa as the fundamental relation between senior and junior. Now, he's naive and stupid about that, but he does have an element of truth in that gentleness is a fundamental trait of a good leader in the East. And I lived 25 years in the West without hearing the word gentleness mentioned once during 25 years to any serious extent. It was just totally missing as a useful concept for life. Gentleness had no part in American life. And it leaves room, when gentleness is gone as an imposed social norm, it leaves room for a lot of tyranny. Now, the East, in its gentleness, has lots of room for tyranny, too, of the bullying social pressure sort. So this Japanese writer was quite a bit naive about the weakness of his own approach. But he was quite right about the weakness. You know, they're all right about the weakness of the other guy. He was perfectly right about the weakness of Western management. He was arrogantly deluded about the weaknesses of his own culture, which he didn't recognize at all. He didn't write a word about. Same with Americans. They're really right about the weakness of Japanese, but they're completely off about the weakness of their own culture. I'm a universally educated guy because I hate everybody. I hate the Japanese culture and its management. I hate the American culture and its management system. I hate the French culture and its management system. I don't hate the Albanian culture and its management system because I don't know them, but I'm sure if I spend 6 months, I already hate them too. So I'm an equal opportunity disliker of the human systems. They're all flawed, and they're all flawed in deeply ugly ways. And it's really, the ways are so ugly, it's hard to prefer one kind of ugliness to the other. Although you do find cynical people who write articles about how our kind of ugliness is better than their kind of ugliness. Like our dog poo smells better than their dog poo. Well, maybe, yeah, sort of. But we really need to get out of that whole contest and not try to win it. So, how did I end up at college? Well, I worked hard to escape from my ugly hometown. And I had this magical word college you go to for 4 years, and it's far away. I knew as a kid. So I actually counted 8 years to college, 7 years to college, 6 years to college. Because I knew it would be escape from my uneducated parents and the 3 million ignorant, slave-owning people around me. And I was right when I got to MIT. It was a thrill. There were sincere people who didn't beat you up, who studied hard all the time, read books on their own, not just school books, but other books because they liked life and liked ideas. That was a thrill. It was really fun. But immediately freshman year, the president of MIT said we were the smartest people on the planet. And I thought that he was a fool because if we were, you shouldn't have said that. And and the fact that you said it was sort of an insecurity. It didn't need saying if it were true. And it made us weaker by believing it about ourselves. And smart people wouldn't have said that about themselves. So therefore, he's not as smart as he thinks he is, and we're not as smart as he thinks we are. So it was a demonstration of some real weakness at the top at MIT. And then the computer science faculty were totally incompetent when I was there. And they just bypassed us all to the British philosophy of Lisp and then IBM computation by Jonathan and stuff like that. Just terrible computer science faculty. And it was overly male, and they celebrated suicide and didn't have enough women faculty, and there was a lot of cowards on the faculty hiding behind math. And I was really, really good at math, and so they didn't intimidate me. And when I looked at the math they wrote on the board, I was not impressed. Wasn't an idea going in, wasn't an idea in the middle, and there wasn't an idea at the end. They just had wasted an hour and a half of our time without thinking. And they were taking the math as thought. And the math is just a set of implied constraints, and you can grow the constraint tree up and down, but you're following set rules about transformation. So you're not getting new information during the transformation. And then the new information comes in when you choose a framework for interpreting results that add stuff that's not in the transformation. And these professors were so cowardly and weak in thinking that they had never noticed or been taught that they were using math that way in graduate school. And then on a statistical basis, they were applying statistical analyses that work only on binomial or only on normal distributions to non-normal distributions. And so most of their analyses were wrong. And I didn't have this intuition confirmed until 30 years later when I was invited to teach at the University of Chicago. And my mentor, Harry Robert, actually wrote papers proving that 77% of the worked statistical examples in the top 10 MBA school textbooks were wrong. 77% of the worked examples in the textbooks for the top 10 MBA programs in the U.S. were wrong. 77%. Because, and the only way to explain a failure that cosmically huge was that two generations of idiots had taught each other. And they had generated one generation of idiots. And he said it all came when statistics left departments of agriculture for business schools and economics departments and social science departments. In agriculture, there was visual feedback on the statistics. You saw yellow here, green here, red here, alive here, dead here. You saw it in the fields. And then as soon as you left that visual feedback, you lost all sense and people didn't know what they were doing. I don't know, but I think that's a really, really accurate, really, really smart thing. And Harry Roberts is probably the smartest person I've met while I was alive. And he was the nicest person to me that I've met since I've been born, other than women. And so how did I do this? Well, I sensed I was escaping a stupid hometown. That was a wonderful victory by being at MIT. But then immediately freshman year, I saw a bunch of cowards in the faculty who didn't really think and hid behind math. And I saw that the computer faculty were really out of date and lazy and didn't have a clue to what computer science was. But there were smart graduate students in a place called Project Mac who really did know what computer science was. And they worked on PDP instead of IBM machines. And they were developing languages with non-deterministic procedure invocation instead of main routines like IBM had. And so they were fun. And they were writing programs that modified themselves with each run as opposed to fixed routines that you just switched them on. So they were fun. And I learned computer science from them quite well in the evenings, but not from courses from the dumb faculty. And then MIT was terribly male, and they celebrated suicide. And so I went to Wellesley, where they had a purely female faculty in culture. And that was thrilling because it was harder thinking than MIT had. And then I did serious 2 years at the end of MIT, serious Buddhism and Taoism, Nathan Sivin for the Taoism, and then Huston Smith, the Dalai Lama, Daisetzu Suzuki, Gary Snyder for zazen meditation 2 hours every morning. And that was a perfect corrective to the Descartesian tyranny of the cognitive conceptual brain over the rest of the brain that Western culture was. And so, you know, I went to college in terms of very serious work. I had 2 years of creative writing at Wellesley with Lillian Hellman, Ray Bradbury, W.H. Auden, and Robert Pinsky. And then I had 2 years of social science at MIT, Harvard, and Wellesley via 3 courses in psychology, 3 courses in political science, 3 courses in philosophy, 3 courses in sociology, and 3 courses in anthropology. And then I took courses in the history of ideas, a course in history of science, a course in the history of religions. So So I got an education, and MIT is a greatly structured place, so you've got all the resources at Harvard or Wellesley there with you. And so there's no reason not to get a college education if you're there, unless you listen to the faculty and do the default patterns that the school gives you. But I thought the school was sick, so I didn't listen to their advice. And I got an education there, and it gave me an enormous amount of power that other people who graduated with 4 years of equations in engineering didn't have, or that the MBAs who grew up just with economics didn't have, and some decency that they didn't have, and some emotional capability and control and powers for design that they don't have. Recent research has shown that people who aren't emotionally activated and full can't make design decisions, and make many fewer, like 8%, 6% of the design decisions that people who are emotionally developed make when they're designers. So emotional thinness, the way they teach you in engineering school or MBA programs, makes you make less, 90% or more less design decisions for any decision or business you're planning than people who are emotionally full doing that. It's called valenced ideation, where you have the idea and then you valence it with how it hurts or helps people. And you capture in words and express the idea in terms of its emotional impact on the world and people, as opposed to as just a pure idea. It's only economics. It's only economics. It's only an engineering equation. It's only engineering. It's not. It's a building. It's going to fall down and kill people. You do it wrong. It's an economic decision that's going to take widows and make them go out on the street and beg because they're not important and they don't have political power. If you don't emotionally valence things, you hurt millions of people's lives. And so you have bad engineering decisions and bad businesses and bad economic policy by people like Robert McNamara with 800 GRE math scores at Harvard Kennedy School, who kill 5 million people and then spend 40 years puzzled by the fact that I'm going to go down in history as a mass killer, but I'm an elite Harvard guy with 800 GREs. How can a guy as smart as me be evil?